The wind was dry and bitter across the broken colony. The sky hung low and heavy, filled with dust that never cleared. Cracked buildings leaned against each other like bones of a dead world. In the middle of this ruined street, a woman walked slowly. Her steps were weak. Her eyes were hollow. She was a widow, abandoned after the war had taken her husband and her children. Her people called her cursed. No one wanted to help her. Her body shook as hunger tore through her. Days had passed since she had last tasted food. Her stomach burned, but there was nothing left to give it. She pressed her thin hand against her chest, whispering to herself that she would not fall. Not yet. Each step was a battle. Each breath was heavy. Still, she walked. She searched for something, anything that might keep her alive one more day. The market was once filled with life, with colors, with voices. Now it was silent. Broken stalls stood empty. Rusted metal scraps lay scattered across the ground. The widow bent down, picking through the dirt for crumbs. She found only dust. Her lips trembled. Her knees bent as if her body would fall apart. She closed her eyes, whispering her husband's name, but only the wind answered her. Then she saw movement. A figure at the far end of the street. At first she thought it was another scavenger. Another who would push her aside, call her worthless, and take what little she could find. She tried to hide, but her legs refused to move. She stayed still, waiting for the cruel voice, waiting for the strike of a hand. The figure drew closer. It was not an alien like her. It was a human. His tall frame and worn armor told her he was a soldier, but not from her people. The war had taught her to hate his kind. Humans were said to be dangerous, ruthless, greedy. They took planets, they took lives, they left only ashes. Her heart raced with fear. She wanted to crawl away, but her body betrayed her. The human stopped, a few steps from her. His eyes were sharp, but not cruel. His breath was heavy, as if he had been walking for days too. He reached into his pack, searching for something. The widow held her breath, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a small silver pack, a ration, his last meal. She stared, her mouth dry, her heart pounding. He held it out to her. "Take it," he said softly. Her eyes widened. No one had spoken to her with kindness in years. She looked at the food, then at him, then back at the ground. She whispered, "Why?" Her voice was broken, almost too soft to hear. The human shrugged. His face showed lines of exhaustion, but his eyes held something steady. "Because you need it more than I do." The widow shook her head. She thought it was a trick, a cruel joke. She thought maybe he wanted to watch her beg. Her people had laughed at her hunger. They had told her death was all she deserved. Why? Would a human, a sworn enemy, offer her life? Her hand trembled as she reached out. The ration felt warm in her palm, though it was only metal and plastic. Tears blurred her vision. She opened the pack and tasted the food inside. It was bland, but to her it was more than a feast. Her lips shook as she ate slowly, each bite bringing strength back to her body. Around them, shadows stirred. Other aliens had seen. Whispers spread quickly across the ruins. "A human gave food to a widow," they muttered. "He wasted his last meal on the cursed one." Their voices carried disbelief, anger, confusion. But the human did not care. He stood still, watching her eat. He said nothing more, only waited until she could breathe without shaking. The widow looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her chest. Not hunger, not pain, but a small, fragile spark of hope. And in that moment, she understood one truth. This man, this human, had saved her life with his last meal. The widow sat on the broken stone, still holding the empty ration pack in her hand. Her body no longer shook with weakness, but her heart trembled in another way. She could not believe what had just happened. A human soldier had given away his last meal to her. A stranger, an enemy, a widow no one else wanted alive. She looked at him again. His armor was scratched, his boots torn. His face was marked with dust and tiredness. He was not much stronger than her. He looked like a man who had also suffered hunger and long nights, yet he had chosen to save her instead of himself. Her mind could not understand it. All her life she had heard one thing: humans were selfish. Humans took what they wanted. Humans destroyed worlds. But this single man had placed survival in her hands. She whispered softly, "Why would you help me? Your people hate mine. My people hate yours." The soldier looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were calm, but deep. "Maybe hate is heavy," he said slowly. "Maybe we carry it too long. Maybe it kills faster than hunger." The widow lowered her gaze, unable to meet his eyes. His words pressed against her chest. Heavy, but strange. True in a way she had never heard before. She had been fed, but more than food. He had given her something else. A reason to breathe. But the ruins around them did not share her quiet moment. From behind shattered walls and broken stalls other eyes had seen, whispers spread. The cursed widow eats food from a human hand. A traitor. A human playing tricks. The widow felt their stares, sharp like knives. Fear returned to her bones. She clutched the empty pack as if it could protect her. She leaned close to the soldier and whispered, "We cannot stay here. They will come." The soldier nodded. He knew enemies did not only wear uniforms. Sometimes enemies were desperate neighbors with nothing left to lose. He stood tall, though his body was heavy with exhaustion, and offered his hand. She stared at it for a moment. To take a human's hand meant breaking all rules of her people, but to refuse might mean death. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Together, they moved through the ruins. The streets were silent but not empty. In every shadow someone watched. The widow kept her head low, her thin veil falling across her face. The soldier kept his hand near his sidearm, ready if someone stepped too close. They reached a fallen tower. The inside was dark, the air cold. The soldier pulled a small light from his belt and shined it against the walls. Dust rose like ghosts. The widow shivered, not only from the cold but from the thought of what hunted them outside. "Rest here," the soldier said quietly. "I will keep watch." But she could not rest. Her mind raced. She thought of the looks she had seen in the market. She thought of the whispers. They would not forgive her for accepting food from him. They would not forgive him for giving it. Somewhere in the shadows, she knew someone had already carried the news to the patrols. Her voice broke the silence. "They will come for us." He looked at her, eyes steady. "Then we move before they do." She wanted to ask him why again. Why risk himself for her? Why not leave her in the dirt where she had been left to die? But she kept the questions in her heart. Maybe the answers would come later. Hours passed. Night fell. The ruins grew colder. She sat against the wall, her eyes half closed, her stomach no longer screaming. For the first time in so long, she felt something she had forgotten. Safety. Not full, not certain, but enough to let her breathe. The soldier sat near the entrance, his weapon ready, his ears sharp. He did not eat. He had nothing left. He had given it all to her. Still, he stayed alert. Still, he guarded her. And far in the distance, boots echoed on the cracked streets. Patrols, soldiers of her own kind, sworn to kill any human on sight. Their lights flashed against the ruined walls, searching. The widow's eyes flew open. She looked at the soldier, fear twisting in her chest. He met her gaze with calm, but his grip on the weapon tightened. The food he had given her had saved her life, but it had also painted a target on them both. The gift had changed everything. The sound of boots grew louder in the night. The widow pressed herself against the wall of the ruined tower. Her breath was sharp, quick, like the beating of a trapped bird. The human soldier raised his hand for silence. His eyes were steady, but his body was tense. The enemy was close. Outside, patrol lights swept across the broken streets. Soldiers of her people marched slowly, their armor shining faintly in the dust. Their voices carried across the ruins, harsh and cruel. Search everywhere. A human was seen here. He will not escape. The widow's chest tightened. If they found him, they would kill him. If they found her with him, they would call her a traitor and kill her too. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Not again. Not another death." The human placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and calm. "Stay quiet. Trust me." His voice was low, but it carried strength. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. In the middle of the storm, he looked steady, like a rock that refused to move. Against her fear, she believed him. The patrol passed slowly, their lights brushing against the broken walls. Dust shifted as footsteps shook the ground. For a moment, one light touched the tower entrance. The widow held her breath until her chest ached. The human raised his weapon, ready to fire if they stepped inside. But after a long moment, the light moved away. The voices faded into the distance. Only silence remained. The widow let out a broken breath. Her legs gave way and she sank to the floor. The human lowered his weapon but did not relax. He knew silence did not mean safety. "We cannot stay here," he said. "They will come again." She nodded, her thin hand shaking. "Where will we go? There is nothing left. No food, no shelter." He studied her face for a moment. His own exhaustion showed in his eyes, but his voice was steady. "We move through the tunnels. There might be supplies and maybe—" He paused as if weighing his words. "Maybe a way out." Her heart twisted. The tunnels were dangerous. Many who entered never returned. But what choice did they have? To stay meant death. To follow him meant danger, but also hope. Slowly she stood. "I will go," she whispered. The soldier nodded once. Together they left the tower, moving through the ruins like shadows. The night air bit at their skin. The widow stumbled on the cracked ground, but the human caught her arm before she could fall. Each time he pulled her forward, never letting her collapse. At last they found a broken hatch hidden under rubble. The soldier pried it open, the metal, groaning. A wave of cold air rose from below. The widow shivered. Darkness waited inside, thick and endless. The human dropped down first, landing with a soft thud. He raised his light and looked up. "Come." She hesitated, her hands gripping the edge. The tunnels smelled of rust and damp stone. Memories of stories filled her mind. People swallowed by the dark, never seen again. But then she looked at him. His hand was raised toward her, waiting. His eyes were not cruel, not mocking, only steady. Her breath shook as she lowered herself into the dark. His hands caught her gently, guiding her down. For a moment, she felt safe. The tunnels stretched out before them, endless black veins through the bones of the colony. The air was cold and heavy. Water dripped in the distance. Their steps echoed softly. They walked in silence for a long time. The widow's mind turned with questions she could not hold back. At last she whispered, "Why do you trust me? I am nothing to you." The soldier glanced at her, his light casting shadows across his face. "Because you did not betray me when you could have, that is enough." Her chest tightened. In her world, no one trusted a widow. No one believed she had worth. But this human did. A dangerous thought grew in her heart. Maybe her life was not over. Maybe it was only beginning. Far behind them, the sound of metal clanged through the tunnels. Patrols had found the hatch. Voices echoed, sharp and angry. The widow froze. The human raised his weapon again. Their eyes met. They both knew what this meant. They were no longer strangers, no longer enemies. They were allies, a dangerous alliance forged in hunger and fear. And if they wanted to live, they would have to fight the world together. The tunnels were endless. Cold air wrapped around them, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the stone walls. Every step seemed to lead deeper into darkness. The widow walked close behind the human soldier. her thin hands trembling as she held onto the damp wall for balance. The light from his small lamp was the only thing keeping the dark away. Her stomach, though calmer after his gift, still twisted with hunger. The small ration had given her strength, but not enough to quiet the emptiness inside. She tried to ignore it, but each hollow growl reminded her of her weakness. The human noticed. His steps slowed, and he glanced back at her. "You need food," he said quietly. She lowered her gaze, ashamed. "We both need food, but there is none." He said nothing, only turned back and continued walking. His silence made her wonder. How could he still move with such strength when he had given her everything? Did he not feel the same pain? Or was he hiding it, carrying it like he carried everything else, quietly, without complaint? After hours of walking, they found a small chamber. Inside, broken crates and rusted equipment lay scattered. The soldier pushed aside the debris, searching. At last, he pulled out a dented container. Inside were dried ration bars covered in dust. The widow's heart leapt. She reached for one but stopped. Her hand froze in the air. She looked at him, shaking her head. "No. You gave me your last meal. You must eat this." He looked at her for a moment, then placed the bar gently in her hand. "We survive together. That is the rule." Her eyes burned with tears. No one had ever spoken such words to her. In her world, survival meant taking, fighting, leaving others behind. But here was a man, an enemy, who believed survival was something shared. She broke the bar in half and held one piece out to him. "Together," she whispered. He accepted it with a faint smile, the first she had seen on his face. They ate slowly, the food dry but filling. For a few minutes, the hunger inside her eased, replaced by warmth. She had forgotten long ago, but peace did not last. The sound of metal echoed again in the tunnels, distant voices, patrols. They had followed the trail. The widow's body stiffened with fear. "They are coming," she whispered. The soldier stood, his weapon ready, his eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows. "We keep moving. Do not fall behind." They left the chamber and continued deeper. The tunnels twisted like a maze. Sometimes they crawled through tight spaces. Sometimes they waded through ankle-deep water. The widow stumbled often, but each time he reached back and pulled her forward. At one point she slipped and nearly fell into a deep crack in the floor. Her cry echoed through the darkness. The soldier caught her arm just in time, pulling her back against his chest. His grip was strong, his eyes steady. For a moment she felt safe, truly safe. Her voice shook. "Why do you keep saving me? I slow you down. Alone you could escape faster." His reply came firm and without hesitation. "Because leaving you behind is not an option." The words sank into her heart like fire. No one had ever said such a thing. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to hold on to it. But she also feared it. If he died because of her, she would never forgive herself. As they moved on, her trust in him grew. Each step he guided, each danger he faced, each word he spoke, it all built something inside her she had never felt before. Not just hope, not just survival, but trust. The patrol's voices grew louder behind them. The soldiers stopped at a fork in the tunnels. Two paths stretched into the dark. One echoed with water, the other with silence. He turned to her. "Choose. Which way?" She froze. Fear battled with doubt. If she chose wrong, they would be trapped. But he waited, trusting her. No one had trusted her judgment in years. She swallowed hard and pointed to the silent path. He nodded. "Then we go." They stepped into the silence together. For the first time, the widow realized something. This was no longer just about hunger. It was no longer about food or survival alone. It was about trust, fragile, dangerous, but alive between them. And in this dark, endless world, that trust might be the only thing stronger than fear. The tunnels seemed endless, twisting deeper into the ground. The widow and the human soldier moved slowly, their steps echoing against stone. Behind them, distant voices still chased, but for a time the sound grew faint. They thought they had bought themselves some peace. But peace in this place never lasted long. After hours of walking, they found a chamber lit faintly by glowing fungi on the walls. The light was dim, but enough to show that someone had once stayed here. A pile of cloth, broken tools, and empty containers rested in a corner. The soldier checked carefully for traps while the widow sank against the wall, her body trembling with exhaustion. Then they heard it, a soft sob. The widow stiffened, her eyes darting to the shadows. From the far corner, a figure emerged, a woman, thin and frail like her, but her eyes sharp with desperation. She too was a widow, her cheeks sunken, her lips cracked from thirst. She fell to her knees. "Please," the woman whispered. "Food, water, anything." The widow's heart ached at the sight. She saw herself in this stranger. Once she had begged in the same way, ignored by all. She looked at the soldier, then reached into her pack. She still had half of a ration bar left. Slowly, she held it out. "Take it. You need it." The stranger's hands shook as she accepted the food. She devoured it quickly, her eyes flickering between the human and the widow. For a moment, gratitude shone on her face, but only for a moment. As the crumbs disappeared, the woman's expression changed. Her eyes hardened, her shoulders straightened. She backed away slowly toward the tunnel entrance, her voice low but sharp. "They were right," she whispered. "A human hides in the tunnels. And now, I can buy my life with this truth." The widow froze, horror spreading through her chest. "No, please don't." The woman's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "You think kindness matters here? Survival does not belong to the weak. They will reward me for this." She turned and ran down the passage. Her voice rose in the tunnels, calling out to the distant patrols. The widow's heart pounded. Betrayal cut deeper than hunger. She had shared her food, offered her last strength, and been repaid with a knife to the back. She turned to the soldier, her voice breaking. "What have I done?" The soldier's eyes narrowed, his weapon already in his hands. He moved toward the tunnel entrance, listening. Voices echoed back, closer now, sharper, filled with anger. The patrol had heard. The chamber shook as boots slammed against stone. The human grabbed the widow's arm. "We run. Now." They sprinted into another tunnel, their breaths ragged. Behind them, shouts filled the darkness. The betrayed gift had drawn death upon them. The widow's chest burned as she ran. Tears blurred her vision. She could still see the desperate eyes of the woman she had tried to save. She could still hear the cruel words. Her stomach twisted, not from hunger, but from pain. Was this her punishment for trusting? The soldier pulled her forward. His voice was hard, steady even in the storm. "Do not look back. Survival is ahead, not behind." But the enemy was faster. The tunnels echoed with marching boots. Lights pierced the dark behind them. A blast of energy struck the wall, sending sparks across stone. The widow screamed, stumbling. The soldier caught her and pulled her behind a broken pillar. More blasts followed, the sound shaking the chamber. The soldier returned fire, his shots bright in the dark, the air filled with smoke and echoes of war. The widow pressed herself against the stone, covering her ears, praying the blast would stop. Then silence. The soldier crouched, his arm bleeding from a burn. His weapon trembled in his hand. "We cannot hold them here," he whispered. The widow crawled to him, her hands reaching for his wound. Her voice shook. "You are hurt because of me. If I had not given food." He stopped her with a look, sharp and unwavering. "You gave because you still have a heart. Do not regret that. Regret belongs to those who betray, not to you." Her tears fell silently. For the first time she believed him, but footsteps still echoed in the dark. The patrol was regrouping, closing in. The betrayal had lit a fire they could not escape so easily. The widow wiped her face, her voice trembling but strong. "Then, we fight together. If they want to kill us, they will see we are not weak. The soldier nodded once, his eyes steady. Side by side, they rose to face the danger. And in that dark tunnel, where betrayal had tried to break them, trust became sharper, then fear. The tunnels shook with the sound of marching boots. The patrol was close now, their voices sharp, their weapons charged. The widow pressed her back against the damp wall, her breath coming fast. The human soldier stood beside her, his arm still bleeding, his weapon low, but ready. His face showed. No fear, only focus. For a moment, silence fell. Then the sound of armored steps grew louder, echoing like thunder. Lights flashed against the stone walls. The patrol was seconds away. The widow looked at the soldier. Her heart twisted. He had saved her life again and again. He had given his food, his strength, his trust. Now he was wounded, and still he stood in front of her like a shield. A thought cut through her. If she did nothing, he would die here because of her. No, she could not allow that. Her thin body trembled, but inside her chest a flame burned. She had been called cursed, worthless, better off dead. But this man had given her something no one else had, hope. And now it was her turn to give something back. She leaned close, her whisper urgent. "Let me distract them, you escape." The soldier's eyes snapped to hers, hard and sharp. "No, we survive together." That was the rule. Her lips trembled. "Rules break when lives depend on it. You gave me food when you had none. You bled to keep me alive. Let me stand for you now." Before he could answer, the first beam of light swept into the chamber. Shouts rose. The patrol had arrived. The widow stood tall, her veil falling from her face. For the first time in years, she did not hide. She stepped forward, her voice rising, strong and clear. "He is mine," she cried into the dark. "You will not touch him." The soldiers froze for a moment, startled by her boldness. Then cruel laughter filled the chamber. "The cursed widow," one sneered. "Look how low she has fallen, protecting a human." Weapons raised. The widow's heart pounded. She had no gun, no blade, only her voice and her will. But she spread her arms wide, placing herself between the soldier and the enemy. Her body shook, but her eyes burned bright. The patrol leader stepped forward. "Move aside, widow, or die with him." Her answer came sharp as stone. "Then I die." The chamber trembled as the words left her lips. The soldier behind her raised, his weapon ready to fight. But for a breathless moment the patrol hesitated. They had expected fear, begging, surrender. Instead they found defiance in the weakest among them. The widow seized that moment. She reached down, grabbed a loose piece of broken metal from the ground, and hurled it at the lights. Sparks burst in the dark. Shadows danced across the walls. The soldiers cursed, blinded for a moment. "Now!" the soldier shouted. He fired into the confusion, his blasts striking stone and armor. The widow ducked low, pulling him by his wounded arm into a side tunnel. Their breaths echoed in the dark as they fled, boots pounding against the floor. Behind them, chaos erupted. Shouts, curses, blasts of energy. The patrol scrambled to regroup, but the pair had already vanished into the twisting tunnels. At last, they stopped in a narrow passage. The soldier leaned against the wall, his face pale, blood soaking through his sleeve. The widow's chest heaved, her body shaking from the rush of fear and courage. The soldier looked at her, his voice low but steady. "You stood for me." Her eyes filled with tears. "You taught me how." For a long moment they stood in silence. In the dark, surrounded by danger, they were still alive. Not because he had saved her, but because she had stood beside him. The widow wiped her face with trembling hands. Her voice was soft but firm. "I was left to die. I was told I was nothing. But tonight, I chose to be something more. And I will not go back." The soldier nodded, pride in his eyes. "Then you are stronger than they ever knew." But far behind them, the echo of boots returned. The patrol was not finished. They had escaped for now, but the hunt was not over. The widow tightened her grip on his arm. Then we keep moving, together. And for the first time in her life, she did not feel cursed. She felt unbroken. The tunnel stretched on like an endless maze. Each step was heavy, but the widow and the soldier pushed forward. Behind them, the sound of the patrol still echoed, distant, yet steady. They knew the enemy would not stop until blood was spilled. The soldier's wound bled through his torn sleeve, his steps slower now. The widow kept her hand on his arm, guiding him when he stumbled. Once, she had been the weak one, the burden. But now, strength rose inside her. It was fragile, yes, but it was hers. At last, they reached a broken stairway leading upward. Cold air drifted down, carrying the smell of ash and dust. The surface. The widow's heart leapt with fear and hope. "If we climb, they will follow," she whispered. The soldier nodded, his jaw tight. "Yes, but freedom waits above. Better to face the open sky than die buried in stone." Together they climbed. Each step groaned under their weight. At the top they pushed aside a rusted grate and crawled into the night. The stars stretched wide overhead, broken only by the skeletons of ruined towers. The air was sharp, but to the widow it felt cleaner than the tunnels. For a moment they stood still, breathing deeply, tasting freedom. But it did not last. Shouts rose behind them. The patrol had found the stair. Lights flickered in the dark, growing closer. The soldier raised his weapon, but his hands shook from blood loss. The widow knew he could not fight much longer. Her chest tightened with fear. If they stayed, they would both die. If she ran, she would live, but she could not leave him behind. Her voice trembled but carried strength. "We need shelter. Somewhere they cannot see." They moved quickly through the ruins. The widow guided him now, her eyes sharp, her steps steady. At last, she found an old temple half buried in rubble. Its doors had long fallen, but its stone walls still stood. Inside, broken statues lay scattered, their faces worn by time. The widow helped the soldier sit against one of the walls. He winced, pressing his hand against his wound. "This is the end," he muttered. "I cannot fight anymore." Her eyes filled with tears. "No," she said firmly. "Not the end. You gave me life when I was ready to die. Now I will fight to keep you alive." She searched the temple, her hands shaking. At last, behind one broken altar, she found a small bundle of supplies, old, but still usable. Cloth to wrap wounds, a flask of water, a faded packet of herbs once used for healing. She returned to him, kneeling at his side. Her hands worked carefully, binding his arm, giving him water, pressing herbs against his wound. He watched her, his eyes heavy but filled with something softer than pain. "You are no longer the starving widow," he whispered. "You are more than that." Her lips trembled, but she smiled through her tears. "Because you showed me I could be." Outside, the patrol's shouts grew louder. Their lights danced across the ruins, searching. The widow knew it was only a matter of time before they found the temple. Her body shook with fear, but she did not step away. She stood in the doorway, broken metal in her hands, her eyes fixed on the dark. The soldier tried to rise, but she pressed him back. "Rest. If they come, I will stand first." He looked at her, pride flickering in his tired eyes. "Then we stand together." The night stretched long, the sounds of the hunt circling closer. Yet inside the broken temple, something new had been born. Not victory, not safety, but a fragile hope. Hope that even in ruins, life could begin again. The widow stood tall, no longer cursed, no longer forgotten. She was not alone. And as dawn's first light touched the horizon, the patrol's shouts faded into the distance. Whether by luck or fate, they were spared for another day. The widow looked at the rising sun, her voice soft but strong. "We will survive, not because the world gave us mercy, but because we gave it to each other." The soldier smiled faintly, his eyes closing as he leaned against the stone. And in that fragile light of morning, two broken lives carried one shared truth. Hope was stronger than fear.